Facebook and Twitter. Tonight we're very happy to have with us back our good friend Kathleen Shine. And they may not mean to, but they do. Kathleen Shine is the author of The Three Wisemans of Westport, The Love Letter, and The New Yorkers, among other novels. She has contributed to The New Yorker, The New York Review of Books, The New York Times Magazine, and The New York Times Book Review. With sympathy, humor, and truth, Shine explores the intrusion of old age into a large and loving family. They may not mean to, but they do, is a radiantly compassionate look at three generations, all coming of age together. Please give her a warm welcome, Kathleen Shine.
No umbrella. Bad luck. Bad luck. I'm very superstitious. I really am. I'm very happy to be here. It's kind of rainy outside, but it's lovely in here in the most beautiful bookstore in the United States, and the most beautifully stocked. I love it here. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from They May Not Mean to, but They Do. And I'm very happy to be also to be live streaming, because I spend, as soon as June 15th, around then comes, late June, I spend most of my life watching bears catching salmon, live streaming of bears in Alaska catching salmon. So now I feel like I'm kind of a celebrity bear, like Otis. He's the one all the insane bear watchers particularly love. This is a novel about a family, and it's about a family aging. And as I was writing it occurred to me that when one person in the family ages, it follows, as night follows day, that everybody else ages too. And so it's a kind of coming-of-age novel of an entire family, of three different generations. And if I can find it here in my crazy notes, the title comes from a poem by Philip Larkin, and it's the second line in the poem. The first line is much better known, and I'm going to read you the poem. I came to this title because as I was writing the book, Joy, who turned out to be the main character in the book, used the first two lines of the poem, but she kind of inverted them. But I will read you the original poem. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. So this is a family where obviously there are children. Joy and Aaron Bergman are in their 80s, and they have a son and a daughter, Molly and Daniel, who are in their 60s, and Molly and Daniel are both married and have children. But Molly, it's a very close family, kind of tribal almost, and Molly has moved to California. So I'm going to start with that in mind. Each time Molly left New York after a visit, Joy felt the air go out of the city. "You're too attached," one of her friends said. "My daughter lives in Australia." Joy shuddered. A daughter in Australia might as well be a dead daughter. Divorce was a terrible thing, and she was sorry Molly had given up a perfectly reasonable husband so she could be a lesbian in California. It was peculiar having a lesbian daughter, though plenty of her friends did too, it turned out. But many things were peculiar in this world, and Joy had overcome her discomfort with Freddie. She even called her my daughter-in-law now. Freddie was a lot of fun, warm, kind, gainfully employed, and low maintenance, everything a mother-in-law could ask for. Joy did not blame her for being a woman, or tried not to. Molly was happy, Joy could see that, and it warmed her heart. But what good is a warmed heart if it is also broken? Joy's heart was broken by California. California. Even the name had become ugly to Joy, like Lee Harvey Oswald or Sirhan Sirhan. This is a little part about Joy and her friends. They had been sorority sisters, and they were still friends, Daphne, Eileen, Natalie, and Joy. Daphne got on Natalie's nerves. Eileen got on Daphne's nerves. Natalie, who was bossy, particularly about her politics, which were of the radical right, got on everyone's nerves. But all three were extremely close to Joy, which had kept the group intact through all the decades and divorces. Every few months, they would get together for a girls' lunch. "I'm not happy about this old age business," Joy said. "I refuse to feel old," Daphne said. She slapped the table. "Je refuse." The silverware and coffee cups rattled, and Joy marveled at Daphne, not a bit different from the day they met, sleek, beautiful, noisy, every auburn hair in place. Natalie was, as she had been since college, wearing chic, expensive bohemian clothes, her hair cut in the same bohemian bob with bangs. Eileen had been less glamorous than the other, but she had grown into her looks as she got older, looking somber but dignified these days. They all still had their marbles, though only two still had their husbands, but pretty good for a bunch of old bags, Joy thought. "We've been friends for 65 years, she said. "Our friendship could get Medicare," Eileen said. Natalie began to explain how Obamacare was ruining America. "How's the new great-grandchild?" Joy interjected, offspring being a successful diversion for any of the girls. Though she was asking Natalie, Daphne immediately began digging around in her bag, probably for her eye thing, with her own great-grandchild baby pictures on it. "They want to name her Quiet," said Natalie. "Convenient," Eileen said. "They can call her and discipline her at the same time." "Mine is 2 years old next week," Daphne added, holding up a screen with a picture of a little girl with an ice cream smeared mouth. "Quiet?" Eileen was saying. "Why don't they just name her No?" They started laughing and couldn't stop. They laughed until tears rolled down their faces. "Oh, that felt good," Joy said. All around them, well-turned-out young women picked at their salads, preserving their waistlines, as women of Joy's generation used to call that mealtime behavior. Joy looked at them fondly, then slathered butter on a piece of bread. Damn the torpedoes. She had no gallbladder. The surgeon had taken it out when he took out the colon cancer. The blue plate special, he'd called it. And never mind her waistline. She was not supposed to eat fat with no gallbladder. She sipped her espresso. That was verboten, too, atrial fibrillation. Delicious, though. It did not do to ignore the delicious. "I love food," she said. The tablecloths were pink and pressed. The napkins were large. "I love napery," she said. "Now, Joy," Daphne said, suddenly serious, "what are we going to do about Aaron?" "I think he's dying," Joy said, and she began to cry softly. Daphne put her hand on Joy's, which was an enormous gesture of support, Joy knew. Daphne did not like touching people. "Nonsense," Natalie said. "What do the doctors say?" Eileen asked. Joy shrugged, and they waited for her to pull herself together and blow her nose. "You have to take care of yourself, too, you know," Natalie said. "Even nurses have shifts." "That's what my children say," said Joy. "They say I'm grandiose, taking care of Aaron myself." "Children, what do they know?" said Daphne. They think they know everything, but just wait. Joy smiled. They are so bossy, aren't they? I do miss Molly ordering me around, though. The smile disappeared, now that she's in California. What about Daniel? Daniel is wonderful, Joy said, but they all nodded. Daniel was not a daughter. Anyway, I'm fine. Isn't there some sort of adult daycare Aaron could go to, Daphne was saying. No, God, no, he would hate that. He gets so disoriented. Then he gets frightened. Then he gets angry. He would hate it. What's he going to do, sit in a drum circle, make paper flowers? Well, what does he do at home, Natalie asked. Watch New York 1 and eat. It's a wonder he doesn't weigh 500 pounds. And a lot of time is taken up with, showers and getting dressed and creams and applications of things. I won't go into it, but trust me, a day goes by, and on the days I'm at work, who knows what could happen. I know you all probably think he should go to a place, she said, but he would be miserable. He needs landmarks, familiar things, his schedule. But what about what you need, they said. I'd be miserable too, visiting a nursing home every day. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. There was something else too, something no one seemed to realize. If Aaron went into a nursing home, he would be gone. What about what you need? Molly and Daniel asked her the same thing. But what she needed was so obvious. She needed Aaron. You're a saint, Daphne said. It was not a compliment. One of those insane, self-destructive saints, Natalie added. The kind who wander around in masochistic determination until they contract an incurable disease or are roasted on a fire or skinned alive, they all agreed. Joy, sweetie, at the very least, you need to hire someone. Hire a saint, Natalie said. When Joy got home, she noticed how gray Aaron looked. His hair, his beard, his face, and his hooded sweatshirt. He was not a man who was meant to be gray. Some men are, but Aaron ought to have been ruddy. He never had been, but he ought to have been. That's what Joy thought. You have to get some fresh air, she said. He waved an enormous hand at her, as if he were swatting a fly. You'll get too stiff sitting around all day. He waved her words away again. Do you hear me? Where are your hearing aids? What? Where are your hearing aids? Joy repeated loudly. What are you talking about? Aaron said. Hearing aids. He shook his head at her folly. I'm going to kill you, Aaron, she said. What? I'm going to kill you, I said. Aaron smiled. So you say. He took her hand and kissed it. And this is at a certain point when Aaron is quite ill and Molly comes back from California. As soon as she got to New York, she would call her parents various doctors. She would organize all their medications in little plastic boxes labeled with the days of the week. She would order a lamp with a high wattage bulb for reading, a telephone with big buttons and an extra loud ring. She would put all their bank accounts online and arrange for deposits and payments to be made automatically. She would set up Spotify and program it to endlessly play Frank Sinatra. She said these things to herself to make herself feel better, but she knew what would really happen. Neither her father nor her mother would be able to decide which doctor she should speak to or find their phone numbers. The medications she organized would be the ones they no longer took. There would be no place to plug in the new lamps with their bright light bulbs. Every outlet in the apartment, and there weren't many, sporting frayed extension cords already overloaded. They would change the appointments she did manage to arrange for them without telling her. Every television in the apartment, and there were too many, would not work. The radio would play only static, loudly. And then there was the computer. Why did you even talk to someone who called out of the blue and said he was from Microsoft, she would ask her mother. because he said he was from Microsoft. Mom, Microsoft doesn't call people like that to say your computer has a virus. They never call anyone. They don't even answer calls. It doesn't work like that. They said it was urgent, Joy said. It wasn't Joy's fault that an entirely new paradigm of communication and commerce had developed in her later years. Molly would say, "Okay, Mom, no harm done, as long as you didn't give them any information." "Of course not, just my name." "I think just my name." "Oh, God, what if I gave them something else, like my credit card number?" "Did you?" "I don't know. How can I remember everything like that? He asked me so many questions." And her mother, her inspiring, unflappable, competent, hard-working, distinguished mother, would berate herself, berate the modern world, then sigh helplessly. "I don't know why Microsoft called in the first place," she would say. "I really don't." I think I'll read one more passage and then I'll stop. Danny arrived at the apartment for dinner an hour late, but Joy had expected as much. He worked hard, such long hours. But since Aaron had become so sick, Danny made sure to have dinner with her at least once a week, no matter how busy he was. He did it to be nice, she knew, which both touched and saddened her. We all prefer to have someone visit for our company, rather than be kept company. But she must not be greedy, she reminded herself. He was here, and as always when she saw him in the doorway, she was happy, deliriously happy. Sometimes she thought she would swoon with love for him. He put his arm underneath hers to walk her to the dining room, and she felt safe for the first time in days, for the first time since he had last been to see her, to be exact. He comforted her just by being in the same room. On the other hand, there he sat, expecting to be fed. Thank God for the housekeeper, because Joy had forgotten to arrange anything for dinner. She tried to remember what exactly she had done all day that kept her from taking care of dinner for Danny. Aaron was in bed. He'd had his dinner already, leftover turkey meatloaf from Joy's ordered-in dinner the night before. He used to laugh when Joy fed him from the various dinners they had ordered in, saying she was a genius at assembling and rearranging garbage. Wanda had made stuffed cabbage and a cucumber salad for Danny, which she made him every time he was there, despite the fact that neither Aaron nor Joy could possibly digest that particular meal. Danny never seemed to notice he was the only one eating it. Joy was having the meatloaf left over from the leftover meatloaf she'd given Aaron. She watched Danny wolf down the stuffed cabbage in huge animal mouthfuls. She really ought to have taught him better table manners. It had somehow not held him back in life. He did have a wonderful wife and children and a successful career, but his table manners, disgusting. "Mom," he said, and gently wiped the corner of her mouth with his napkin. "Ketchup." "Dribbling," she said. "Time to put me out to pasture." Joy listened contentedly as he talked about energy, how we squandered it, how there would be no energy left. "I have no energy," she said. "Can you people help me?" Mom. Danny had devoted his professional life to combating climate change. If he occasionally lost his sense of humor when it came to the environment, you couldn't blame him. She just forgot now and then. "Danny, I'm sorry, that was glib." "Sorry, Mom, it's just that I deal with these idiots all day long." He patted her hand, and she had the urge to put her cheek against his, to kiss it. She could see he was getting restless. "Wanda gave Daddy too much fruit today," she said. "Did she?" Danny kept looking at his phone, pulling it out of his pocket, staring down at it as he held it below the level of the table, as if that somehow made it more discreet, like holding a napkin in front of your mouth when you picked an annoying bit of food from between your teeth. "It's very rude what you're doing," she said. "Is this the way it's going?" "Is this the way what's going?" Danny asked, still looking at his phone. "Civilization. Everyone always looking at those electronic things. He looked up. Sorry. He looked back at the phone. People are going to forget how to talk to each other, that's all. I said I'm sorry. Joy could feel the tears welling up. She took a deep breath. Danny was tired, overburdened. He had so much on his mind. The changing climate, the melting polar ice, droughts and floods, the girls getting into decent schools. How are the girls? She asked. Danny gave her a suspicious look. They're very busy, Mom. They have a lot of homework. And birthday parties, Joy thought. It was mathematically impossible the number of birthday parties those little girls went to. Homework and birthday parties, a balance of a sort. I know, sweetheart. They work so hard. So do you. Yeah, he said, mollified. We do. I'd love if they called, just to say hello. He laughed unkindly. You sound like Grandma Bergman. Your finger broken? You can't dial a phone? I mean, you can call them too, Mom. Joy could not explain this to her son, would have been too ashamed even to mention it. But when she did call his house, everyone there was always so busy. It made her feel awkward and intrusive, out of step. Grandma Bergman, she said. Them's fightin' words. She stood at the door watching as Danny, large and wilted and fiddling with his phone in his pocket, waited for the elevator, and she was glad for once that the elevator was so slow. She could not take her eyes off him. Your briefcase is so heavy, Danny. You should get one with wheels. He laughed, walked back, gave her another hug. Over his shoulder, she could just make out the elevator door opening. She said nothing, holding her big, tired son in her arms. The door closed, and the elevator began its slow ascent to some other floor. A high floor, she hoped, her face against his chest. Maybe the penthouse. That night, Joy pressed her back against the cushions of the sofa. It was late, 3 a.m., but it was not dark. It was never dark in New York. Those few hours when all the creatures of the city, the screeching, roaring buses, the howling ambulances all seemed to take their rest, when the garbage trucks had not yet trundled out of their caves, it was quiet. She could hear Walter changing Aaron's colostomy bag. God bless you, Walter, she thought. May the Lord bless you and keep you and shine his countenance upon you. But who will pay you? Not the Lord. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to take questions if you have questions. No questions? Oh, I know someone. I'm going to call on you. I'm calling on you. I wrote the book because it was the only book at the moment that I wrote it that I could write, actually. It was a kind of difficult moment in my life, a very long one, when a lot of people in my family were sick and dying and taking care of one another. And I was completely absorbed in that and really obsessed with it. And I didn't really want to write about my family or my situation. I'm not a memoirist, and it's not as interesting to me. I like to kind of discover things that aren't from me. But it was so overwhelming that I thought, and also whenever I went out with my friends, this is what we talked about. We talked about our aging parents. And I thought, well, either you are an aging parent, you have an aging parent, you have had an aging parent, you wish you still had an aging parent, or, you will soon be an aging parent. And so it suddenly became very urgent. And that was kind of the spark for it. And then it took off, and the family, although I have stolen many things from my incredibly tolerant family, it's not my family or exactly my situation. But I did all the funny lines. I did steal from my mother, who, whenever I would speak to her, and she would say something, I'd say, I'm writing that down. Just so you know, I'm warning you, I'm appropriating your humor and your life. And she would say, oh, and then she'd just start saying more funny things. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Although Joy is quite different from my mother in many ways, but she says a lot of all the good lines I stole. So that's where it came from. No, I was writing them down while I was writing the book, and that's why I really had to warn her. But she's, look, I've been writing for 33 years, as one review pointed out, and I almost fainted dead away. And so, she's, and my first two books were quite autobiographical, and so, they're all used to me now. But I did, because she would just say these incredibly insightful, funny, crazy things, and I would just, I just always had a pen with me when I was talking to her, but I did warn her. So, yeah, fair warning. My first two books. My first book was called Alice in Bed, and it was a book about. Well, in the book, she's 19 because she was so infantile that I had to make her a year younger than I really was. I was 20 and I was in the hospital for a year, and so Alice in Bed is a novel based on that experience, and it's a comedy. It's a sex comedy. And the second one again is a rather broad comedy called To the Birdhouse, and it's about. This was actually before the word stalker was used, but my mother actually had a stalker, and so I completely appropriated that story, but I never used the word stalker because it didn't exist yet. Ask her. It was well, anyway, and it's not that book is not completely autobiographical again, but it was kind of inspired by this family crisis. So, and that's it. That's a very broad comic novel. This novel's a little less. I hope it's still funny, and I hope there's a lot of funny stuff in it. I think there is, but it's in many ways more serious and more personal, not more autobiographical, but more emotional and personal, I think, than some of my other books. Well, it's interesting. Sometimes people see themselves when it has nothing to do with them. So someone will say, oh, I see you used that story I told you, and I don't know what they're talking about because, in fact, I stole it from a completely different person. So I'm careful about other writers, which you have to be, who tell you a funny story, and you think, ooh, I'm going to go write that down, and then you realize, no, that's their livelihood, their imagination, their interpretation. I can't do that, and I don't, because I don't really base a character on one particular character, or take one real story and use that as is. I justify myself in that way, but I think that I think sometimes people get upset, but sometimes it really has really nothing to do with that. It was the farthest thing from my mind, and I don't even know what they're talking about. So you just, at a certain point, you just have to stop thinking about the reader, because that can be very oppressive. And you think, well, will someone think this is funny? Will someone like this? I want everyone to like me. And then you start writing garbage. And you have to think, am I going to, and then you think, oh, am I hurting someone's feelings? And then again, you write kind of garbage. And so at a certain point, you have to just push everything aside and just do it, and then look at it later and try to sort all that out. Yeah. I have done a little bit. I don't teach very much. I did a workshop this past March, and it was interesting. I mean, I was done with this book, so I wasn't writing, and I don't know if I could write and do a workshop like that at the same time. And it only lasted a month, and it was only once a week, but I got completely absorbed in it, and I thought about what they were writing day and night, and how do I make a class out of this? How do I take these two stories and try to make, and actually turn this into a kind of talk and something where we can all figure things out? And it was hard, and it was exhausting, and I don't know how people do it. I think, some people are probably better at it than I am, or more have more distance, or have done it enough times. I've taught at Barnard. I taught a couple of classes, and they were young and easily fooled, so I could get away with things. But yeah, it's interesting to teach. It's hard. Yeah. I live in Los Angeles. I did live in New York for 40 years, and I grew up in Connecticut, but then I lived in New York for a long time. And in the last 5 years, I guess I've lived I've really lived in Los Angeles, but I go back to New York frequently. So, but I love Los Angeles. I still can't believe it. I still feel like I'm on vacation when I wake up. Maybe people in Miami feel that way. I don't know, but I look out the window and I see palm trees and I think, wow, I'm working. I'm having a working vacation. So I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was different to write, and it took a number of tries before I got the tone right, because in a way, for me anyway, writing in a more serious way, I feel more vulnerable, and especially after having written so many novels, I know how to do certain things, and I know how to crack the joke, and so this required, because of the subject, it required a different kind of depth, and so it was hard. It was very rewarding, but it always takes several tries before I can find the right tone. But I think this was even more. It didn't take longer, but it was harder, I think, with every book, you sort of have to let go of whatever you thought you knew from the book before. And with my first book, I knew nothing, so it was not an issue. But, after that, with each book, I had to say to myself, dare to be romantic, dare to be passionate, dare to be serious. And in this, it was really kind of just open your heart to all of these people, which is what one of my friends, when she first read the first draft of the first 100 pages, said, there's wonderful stuff here. This is important. This is wonderful that you're writing about this, but just open your heart. And it sounds like a cliche, but it was tremendously moving to me as a writer and as a person. For some reason, it just struck the right chord, and it changed the way the book was composed and the way I felt. But it took a while to get there. So yeah, I think it is different in that respect. But occasionally, I wandered off into slapstick, just once, really. And I put a dog in, you know. You have certain things have to, you know, they turn up. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming in the pouring rain. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, we have all the books of Kathleen's behind the register out there if you want to buy a couple copies of each, including Alice in Bed and To the Birdhouse. As again, online, give us a call. We'll get a book signed for you. We'll ship it to you. For those of you here, she'll be sitting right over here signing. Can we get another round of applause for our author? That was a wonderful event. And we thank you all for coming out, especially with this inclement weather. We really appreciate it. So if you can, stick around. We got some live music coming up. You can grab a bite to eat in our wonderful cafe. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.